A huge component of any mental health disorder is self-doubt. Often to the point of paralysis. It's so common that I often think about it as a distinct illness altogether. I like to call it self-efficacy disorder. At some point, we have to learn to trust ourselves. And this reminds me of one of the most powerful personal lessons in self-efficacy I've experienced. It was my first solo flight as a pilot in training. And one of the most memorable and terrifying moments in any pilot's career is the first time they have to land the plane without their instructor sitting right beside them. Even though I've been a pilot for almost 30 years now, I still remember it like it was yesterday. It was a beautiful fall afternoon. It was calm and cool. My instructor and I were practicing landings in my little two-seat 1946 Cessna taildragger, me in the left seat and him in the right seat. And in case you're not familiar with how small planes are set up, you can fly from either seat. There's a full set of controls on both sides so that the co-pilot, in this case the instructor, can take over at any time. Now on this day, we were doing a series of takeoffs and landings known as touch and goes, when my instructor asked me to taxi over to the side of the runway and turn the engine off. So I did. By this time, I had many training hours under my belt, but always with him seated next to me. Once I stopped, he hopped out and said, "All right, take her around." By which he meant take off, fly once around the field, and land by myself. And I said, "No way! I'm nowhere ready to land this thing on my own." I probably said it a little bit more colorfully than that. He said, "You've been landing this plane without my help for the last several days. I've just been sitting here daydreaming. I wouldn't let you go if I thought you couldn't do it." But I insisted, I am not ready. And I was pretty certain that I was not. And he looked at me and he said, "Well, then you're done. So go around, or let's take her home." By the way, please do me the favor of giving this video the thumbs up if you find it interesting or helpful. And if you really want to see more of content like this, please subscribe. I also read and enjoy the comments, so please leave one below if you're so inclined. Now, as I was saying, I was absolutely certain that my instructor had been sitting there all along, making small adjustments that I was unaware of, keeping us both safe. I still had the distinct feeling that it wasn't me who was actually doing all of the flying. And at some point, one has to take a leap of faith and see where it goes. Otherwise, and this is all too often the case with many of my patients, we give in to our self-doubt. We allow fear to paralyze us. So this is the point I was at that day. Go solo or give up. Now, I trusted him, but it was me that I was unsure of. Nonetheless, I took the leap. The flight itself was a bit of a blur. I vaguely remember taxiing for takeoff, talking to the tower, pulling the yoke back, and lifting off. But the memory of landing the plane alone, with the next seat to me empty, well, that is crystal clear. It's burned into my memory. And I taxied back after surviving the landing to pick up my instructor, and he hopped in and he said, "See? Somehow, I'd done what I was pretty sure I couldn't do, at least on my own. There was no doubt this time I was the only one in the plane, and I finally understood that it had to be all me." Now, like a flight instructor, my job as a psychiatrist is to instruct. It's not to fix my patients, but rather to help them learn how to navigate things that had seemed difficult or impossible up till now, at least on their own. So we start by working together, identifying distorted thinking. I'm not good enough, I can't do this. We practice skills, we work through trauma, and we do all of this together. But at some point, after enough therapy and practice, they have to fly solo. They have to prove to themselves that they can do these things on their own. After all, this is the very definition of recovery. At the end of the day, you're never going to be sure that you actually landed the plane until there's no one sitting in the right seat. It's one thing to tell someone, "You got this," but it's another thing for them to believe it. So later I asked my instructor, I said, "Are you ever worried when one of your students takes their first solo flight?" And he goes, "I'm always worried. But at some point, you have to fly your solo." Please, if you would like and subscribe to my channel, I would be ever so grateful. It really does help encourage me to continue to make the content like this. I'm Dr. Blackburn, and remember, mental health and physical health, they're the same thing.